Six car brands are facing existential crises right now. Bankruptcy filings among suppliers, EV manufacturers, and retailers have surged to decade highs by 2025. And what nobody tells you until it's too late is that when a car brand collapses, your vehicle becomes an orphan, parts disappear, dealerships close, resale value evaporates overnight. You're left holding a depreciating asset with no support system. I'm going to walk through 6 brands showing genuine warning signs, not speculation, not rumors, actual financial data, restructuring announcements, and market performance that paints a very specific picture of what's coming. Because the decision you make today about which brand to buy from could determine whether you're driving a supported vehicle in 3 years or something nobody wants to touch. Let's start with number 6. Number 6, Chrysler. In 2025, Chrysler is exclusively a seller of minivans. Since the sunset of the Chrysler 300 sedan, the Pacifica and resurrected Voyager are all that's left. Sales have fallen by 50% over the past decade. With Chrysler's Airflow EV officially dead, it's not clear if there's a future at all for Chrysler. Think about that for a second. An entire American automotive brand reduced to selling one vehicle with 3 different names. Chrysler has one vehicle with 3 names, the Pacifica, also called the Voyager, and in Canada, the Grand Caravan. One notable absence from the reported core group is Chrysler. When Stellantis announced its strategic focus on 4 core brands, Chrysler wasn't included. Jeep made the list. Ram made the list. Peugeot and Fiat made the list. Chrysler did not. The Airflow concept was supposed to save the brand, an electric SUV that would compete in the hottest segment of the market. It's been canceled, pushed back, redesigned, and nobody knows if it's actually coming. Stellantis keeps promising new electric models and flashy concepts, but that doesn't help when showrooms need cars people can actually drive home. Here's what makes this particularly troubling for buyers. Chrysler dealers have massive overhead tied to a brand that sells almost nothing. When the brand officially dies, those dealerships will either convert entirely to Jeep and Ram or they'll close. If you bought a Pacifica in the last 2 years, finding a dealership to service it 5 years from now might require driving to another city. The resale value has already collapsed. Nobody wants to buy into a brand that might not exist. And Stellantis has made it clear through their actions, not their words, that Chrysler is not a priority. You can say you're committed to a brand all you want, but when you give it one product in 10 years, the market reads that message clearly. Number 5, Fiat. Last year, it sold over 1.2 million cars worldwide. However, this list is largely focusing on brands in the US, and that's where things are really bad for the Italian giant. 1,528 in the US in 2024, which was actually a massive increase from 2023. This was largely due to an improvement in Fiat 500 deliveries. The car went from 12 buyers in 2023 to 970 last year. The Fiat 500L and the Spider recorded 0 sales, while the 500X moved 558 units. Read those numbers again. 12 buyers in an entire year. That's not a car brand. That's a rounding error. Fiat exists in America as a placeholder, a name on a sign that generates almost no revenue. The company isn't investing in new products for the US market because the return on investment doesn't exist. They sell fewer vehicles annually than some individual dealerships move in a month. The danger for buyers is twofold. First, parts availability. When you're selling 1,500 vehicles a year, the supply chain supporting those vehicles is razor thin. A specialized part for a 500X might take months to arrive because there's no volume justifying inventory. Second, dealer network collapse. In 2025, there are only 300 Mitsubishi dealers in the United States, a fraction of the competition's footprint. Fiat faces the same trajectory. When sales drop this low, dealers drop the franchise. You're left with fewer and fewer places that can service your vehicle. Fiat won't announce they're leaving the US market with a press release and a farewell tour. They'll just quietly stop importing new models. Existing dealers will stop renewing franchise agreements, and one day you'll realize there's no longer a Fiat dealer within 100 miles of your home. Number 4, Maserati. In 2024, Alfa Romeo sold just 8,865 cars in the US. The Quadrifoglio versions of the Giulia and Stelvio have officially been canceled, leaving an even narrower lineup for American car buyers. But Maserati's collapse has been even more severe. Maserati sold itself as accessible Italian luxury. The Ghibli and Quattroporte were supposed to compete with German sedans at lower price points. What actually happened was buyers discovered Chrysler parts in $80,000 vehicles. The financial situation at Stellantis is forcing brutal decisions. With recent leadership shakeups at Stellantis, it's more likely than ever that some brands are on the way out. Alfa Romeo is at the top of that unfortunate list. Maserati sits right next to it. The product lineup has shrunk dramatically. The sedans are gone or dying. The SUVs aren't selling. And the brand has no clear identity anymore. It's not truly exotic. It's not competitive with German luxury on reliability. It exists in a no man's land where the badge costs more than the engineering justifies. For buyers, this creates a catastrophic depreciation scenario. Maserati values are already collapsing because the market sees what's coming. A 3-year-old Ghibli is worth a fraction of its original price, not because it's a bad car, but because nobody knows if the brand will be around to support it. The dealer network is already contracting. Service costs are astronomical because parts are expensive, and mechanics who know these vehicles are rare. If Stellantis pulls the plug on Maserati in North America, existing owners become orphans. Your vehicle is still drivable, but you're on your own for everything else. Number 3, Alfa Romeo. Alfa Romeo once had a bright future in North America. Following the brand's arrival in 2016, sales climbed quickly and peaked at nearly 24,000 units sold in 2018. However, it's been steadily downhill ever since. In 2024, Alfa Romeo sold just 8,865 cars in the US. That's a 63% decline from peak to present in 6 years. The trajectory is unmistakable. The Quadrifoglio versions of the Giulia and Stelvio have officially been canceled, leaving an even narrower lineup for American car buyers. Those were the halo products, the performance models that justified the brand's existence in the minds of enthusiasts. Without them, what is Alfa Romeo? A more expensive Jeep with Italian styling. The fundamental problem is that Alfa Romeo never built the dealer network or service infrastructure needed to succeed in America. They launched with limited distribution, limited marketing, and vehicles that had genuine reliability concerns. The Giulia and Stelvio are genuinely excellent to drive, but American buyers want confidence that their vehicle will be reliable and supported long term. Alfa never delivered that confidence. Stellantis announced that it might divest some of its brands in 2026, marking a strategic pivot aimed at refining its focus. Alfa Romeo is expensive to maintain as a standalone brand with minimal volume. The business case for keeping it in North America is weak and getting weaker. Here's what that means practically. If you buy an Alfa Romeo in 2026, you're buying a vehicle that might lose brand support in 2 years. Parts will become harder to source. The already limited dealer network will contract further. Resale value will collapse because buyers know the risk. The enthusiast community loves these cars. The Giulia Quadrifoglio was one of the best sports sedans ever made. But loving a car doesn't change the financial reality that the brand supporting it is on life support. Number 2, Mitsubishi. Mitsubishi has been on borrowed time for years. Back in 2000, Mitsubishi wasn't too far behind the likes of Toyota, Honda, and Nissan. In 2025, there are only 300 Mitsubishi dealers in the United States, a fraction of the competition's footprint. It's not clear if the success of the Outlander will be enough to keep the brand stateside in the long term. The brand exists today primarily because it's part of the Renault-Nissan-Mitsubishi alliance. But that alliance itself is fracturing. Nissan reported a net loss of 671 billion yen, $4.5 billion for the financial year to March 2025. Its worst ever full year net loss was 684 billion yen in 1999 to 2000 during a crisis that birthed its rocky partnership with French automaker Renault. When the parent company is in crisis, the weakest brands get cut first. Mitsubishi is the weakest link. The product lineup is thin. The Outlander is the only vehicle generating meaningful volume, and even that is modest compared to competitors. The Eclipse Cross has disappointed. The Mirage was canceled. There's nothing new coming that would change the brand's trajectory. The dealer network is the real warning sign. 300 dealers across the entire United States means vast areas of the country have no Mitsubishi presence at all. If you live in a rural area or a smaller city, you might be driving 2 hours to reach the nearest dealer. That's not sustainable for a mass market brand. Mitsubishi won't go bankrupt. They'll just quietly withdraw from North America, stop importing new models, let existing dealer agreements expire, and eventually announce they're focusing on markets where they have stronger presence. If you buy a Mitsubishi today, you're buying a vehicle that will be difficult to service, difficult to sell, and potentially impossible to get parts for in 5 years. The value proposition seems attractive because prices are low. Prices are low because the market has already priced in the risk that the brand is leaving. Number one, Nissan. This is the big one. And the situation is worse than most people realize. Nissan expects to post a net loss of 650 billion yen, $4.2 billion, for the fiscal year ending March 2026, citing non-cash accounting charges and restructuring costs. For the first 9 months of fiscal 2025, the company reported a net loss of $1.6 billion. Nissan Motor faces a tough fiscal 2026 with higher costs and weaker demand pushing revenues down 4%. Retail unit sales are expected to fall sharply by 14%, led by declines in Asia and North America. Nissan's full-year outlook is also clouded by the difficulties in calculating the cost of a restructuring that will see it cut 20,000 jobs, shut factories, and reduce production. U.S. President Donald Trump's tariffs on imported cars and parts has also weighed heavily on the car maker's results. This isn't a struggling brand. This is a company in a survival crisis. 20,000 job cuts, factory closures, massive losses, and no clear path back to profitability. Although U.S. sales have steadily fallen, they're still selling over 900,000 cars annually. However, Nissan's corporate leadership has made it crystal clear that the company's immediate threat is its balance sheet. Last year, an anonymous Nissan official told the Financial Times that the automaker has 12 to 14 months to survive. 12 to 14 months to survive, not to thrive, not to turn around, to survive. The merger discussions with Honda have failed. The company ousted its former CEO, Makoto Uchida, in March, along with 4 other top executives following its failed merger with rival Honda Motor Company earlier this year. That was supposed to be the lifeline. When merger talks collapse during a financial crisis, it signals that the numbers are worse than publicly disclosed. The company is pursuing asset sales, including selling its global headquarters in Yokohama to a group sponsored by Taiwanese auto parts maker Minth Group for 97 billion yen. When you're selling your headquarters building, you're not restructuring. You're liquidating assets to stay solvent. Here's what makes Nissan different from the other brands on this list. Nissan is too big to just quietly exit markets. They have millions of vehicles on the road, a massive dealer network, hundreds of thousands of customers who bought vehicles assuming long-term support. But too big to fail doesn't mean too big to collapse. General Motors went bankrupt in 2009. Nissan could follow that path. A bankruptcy restructuring would honor warranties probably, but the dealer network would contract dramatically. Parts availability would become inconsistent, and the brand's reputation would be permanently damaged. Of Japan's major automakers, Nissan is likely to be the most severely impacted by U.S. President Donald Trump's 25% tariff on imported vehicles. Its clientele has historically been more price sensitive than that of its rivals. So the company can't pass the costs on to consumers to the same extent as Toyota or Honda without suffering a significant loss in sales units. The tariff situation makes this exponentially worse. Nissan imports heavily from Mexico and Japan. A 25% tariff on imported vehicles would be catastrophic for their business model. They can't absorb those costs. They can't pass them to consumers who are already price sensitive. The math doesn't work. Retail unit sales reflecting cars sold to customers are expected to drop sharply by 14% to 2.9 million vehicles in 2026. Wholesale volumes or cars shipped to dealerships are projected to fall 3% to 2.6 million units, a 14% decline in retail sales in a single year. That's not a cyclical downturn, that's a market share collapse. If you buy a new Nissan today, you're making a bet that the company survives its current crisis, successfully restructures, and returns to profitability within the next 2 years. That's a risky bet when the company itself says it has 12 to 14 months to survive. The resale value will suffer regardless. Even if Nissan pulls through, the perception of instability will depress used values for years. Nobody wants to buy a used car from a brand that was on the brink of bankruptcy. So what do you do with this information? Major global automakers, including Hyundai, Toyota, and General Motors, are warning of difficult conditions ahead for the U.S. automotive market in 2026, with Cox Automotive forecasting sales will decline 2.4% to 15.8 million units. The entire industry is under pressure, but some brands are facing existential threats while others are navigating normal cyclical challenges. If you're shopping for a vehicle in 2026, brand stability matters more than it has in decades. A great deal on a car from a failing brand is not a great deal if you can't get it serviced or sell it in 3 years. Ask yourself, is this brand investing in new products for the US market? Is the dealer network growing or shrinking? Are they profitable or restructuring? Is the parent company stable? For Nissan buyers specifically, demand warranties in writing. Understand that manufacturer warranties are only as good as the company backing them. If Nissan enters bankruptcy, those warranties could be restructured or eliminated. For brands like Chrysler, Fiat, Maserati, and Alfa Romeo under Stellantis, recognize that you're buying into a portfolio that's being actively trimmed. Tavares, speaking at this week's Paris Motor Show, told on his trade publication Automotive News the company has long planned to review its portfolio by 2030. But the company may speed up the process and will review the performance of all its brands to determine whether to reduce the size of its portfolio as early as 2026. The safest move? Stick with brands that are profitable, investing in new products, and have stable parent companies: Toyota, Honda, Hyundai, Subaru, Mazda, brands that aren't making headlines for restructuring or survival crises. The automotive industry is going through a brutal transition period. Northvolt, a Swedish battery manufacturer, filed for bankruptcy in March 2025 due to rising capital costs, geopolitical instability, supply chain disruptions, shifts in market demand, and concerns over production efficiency. U.S. tariffs are expected to put further financial strain on an already reeling industry. For example, Ford Motor Company projected tariffs to cost $2 billion in 2025. General Motors forecasted tariffs to cost $4 billion to $5 billion annually. Automotive suppliers face a perfect storm in 2026. Falling orders, Chinese competition, and high costs threaten widespread bankruptcies, particularly among smaller tier component makers. With 70% of Europe's suppliers expecting profits below sustainability thresholds, major players such as Bosch, ZF, and Aumovio are cutting tens of thousands of jobs. Experts warn this crisis could trigger supply chain disruptions for automakers. This isn't fear-mongering. This is the reality of an industry under unprecedented pressure from tariffs, electrification costs, and market shifts. Some brands will adapt and survive, others won't. The vehicle you buy today could be supported and valuable in 5 years. Or it could be an orphan from a dead brand that nobody wants to touch. Choose carefully.